Hey, so this is the second part of a two-part tutorial on the basics of mixing drums, and hopefully showing you a few tricks and tips to help your drum mixes along, especially if you're a little bit hazy on some of the effects or some of the techniques involved. The first part we looked at adding compression, a little bit of EQ and gating a few of our drums in order to prep them for actual mixing. So if you missed that first part, I suggest you go and watch how we got to this stage. And this part of the tutorial, I'm going to show you how to blend all of these together and some extra tips and tricks in order to get your drums sounding really, really good. So what we talked about in the first one is the importance of our overheads. And when we come to actually blending our tracks together, that's where we're going to start. So our overheads sound like this. And the trick with blending in your individual spot mics is start off with your overheads and then blend in each one individually until you're happy with the sound of the drums with that extra spot mic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce the kick drum until I'm happy with how loud my kick drum is compared to the rest of my kit. I don't want my kick drum really standing out too much in the mix. I want it blending in with the rest, but I want it to be punchier than just on the overheads here. So let's blend it in. Let's add the snare. Let's go to a bit with the hi-hats in so we can blend the hi-hats in. And finally, let's try and blend in these tom mics. Right, that's sounding pretty good, to be honest. And it is a real trick to kind of blend these all in. So you want to be hearing everything punchy and clear, but you don't want anything too overbearing. You don't want your kick drum to be up here. So extra tips and tricks. So that's, if you get up to this stage, you know, for some people, it would be very satisfying to get your drums sounding this good. What we're going to be dealing with now is extra tips and tricks in order to really, really maximize the sound of your drums. Tip number one is an effect that you can get in Logic. And I've talked about it in one of my previous videos on mastering. But down the bottom here, and we're going to put it on our actual bus channel here, our master. Click on it. Under dynamics, there's a thing called a multipressor, and we've talked about it before on this channel, but it's basically a compressor that compresses 4 different frequency bands separately. So it deals with our lows, our low mids, our highs, high mids and our high frequencies separately as 4 different compressors. And what I mentioned the last time I talked about this is that similarly, if you're having trouble with compressors themselves and what ratio and attack and release and threshold and all those things are, trying to get your head around 4 of them working simultaneously across the entire frequency band is going to be very confusing. So again, there's some quite nifty little presets here. There's one down the bottom that I want to introduce you to. There's one called Punchy Drums. In fact, there's 2. There's one called Punchy Drums and one called Hi-Fi Drums. I'm going to stick Punchy Drums on and see what it sounds like. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it on and off, and you can hear the effect that this is having on our track. It really just tightens up the sound of that kit. and really like gives it a good balance. I'll show you the other one, the hi-fi drums. They're quite nice if you're really struggling for understanding this and you want some presets to be getting on with. I think that sounds pretty good. And this is like a real secret little recipe for getting your drum sounding very good. Another little secret recipe for getting your drum sounding really punchy is again on this master output here. If you click on where it says sends, you click on bus and you click on bus 2. And if I turn this up here, basically what it's doing is it's sending a duplicate of this mix here onto another bus channel. And on this second bus channel here, it's going to be a duplicate of our drums here. But what we're going to do is we're going to click on here. We're going to click on compressor. And under presets, instead of looking at the drums ones at the top, we're going to be looking at compressor tools. And down the bottom of compressor tools is one that says smashed. And we click that. And what it does is it absolutely hammers the compression on our drums. Let's have a listen. Now, on its own, that sounds horrendous, don't get me wrong. But what it does is if you take this right down to 0 and you blend it in with your main mix here, that absolutely smashed compression here really brings out the punchiness in your main track. Have a listen. So sending it to a separate bus channel and absolutely compressing it to death using one of those settings is a real great way of bringing out some punchiness in your drums. There's something I alluded to in the first video where I talked about the kick drum, and we listened to the kick drum on its own and we thought it sounded a bit weak and middly. I mean, it's not terrible, but I think it could do with beefing up a little bit. So the next extra tip that you can do is if you click on your drums and we go up to track up the top here, and under track there is something that says replace or double drum track, and this works fantastic on the kick and quite well on the snare as well, but I'm just going to use it on the kick today. And if you click on replace or double drum track, what it does is it goes through the entire audio channel and tries to sense where the loudest parts of that channel are, transients, and it tries to create a MIDI channel underneath, you can see here, and it tries to create MIDI notes that sync up to where the kick is. So every time there's a kick, it's adding a MIDI note in, and what you can do is on this MIDI channel here you can actually trigger a separate kick drum sample that kicks in every time the kick drum plays. Now the problem is that when you first do this, it takes a guess as to where to set the volume so it triggers the MIDI notes. Now you'll notice here you can see the kick drums here. You can see kick, 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 kick. But this one here, this is a snare drum that is picked up on the kick drum mic and it's accidentally added an extra note in. So what you can do is you can turn that threshold up a little bit, you see, and it's just got rid of that one note there, but it's kept all the others. And when you're doing your drum doubling is to just take a look through your track and just be happy that it's only picking up the kick drums, which I think that is just doing at the moment. Set the instrument as kick and set it as doubling, and you click OK. And what it does is underneath our kick drum here, we've got a channel that's got kicks on it on our sampler. And what you can do on the sampler track here, if I double click on it, click on it there, and it's on the left here. If I double click on it, Here you go. And there are loads of preset factory kicks, single drums, kicks, and there's loads and loads of different kicks here. You can just scroll through them all. And the trick is, in fact, we're actually going to use the first one that it came up with, I think. Quite like that one. There we go. Just because that's got a little bit of beefiness down the bottom that I think my main drum lacked. So we're just going to leave it there. And like our normal kick drum, we're going to add a compressor onto it and compress it like a proper kick drum. And what you can do now is I can blend this double drum take with our actual drum take. And we've actually got a bit more of a beefy kick drum where we didn't have one before. This is one of the only things that you can fix in the take afterwards. You can fix your kick drum. Let me just chop the end of this off. You can fix your kick drum. You can kind of make it work on your snare as long as your drummer is not being too busy and doing loads of ghost notes on your snare. The rest of the kit you can't really do it on because there's so much bleed picked up from different microphones. So if we balance that kick drum in there, we've actually got a pretty nice sounding kit now with everything. And the last little trick that I'll show you, and this is for if you want a bit of a rawer drum sound. So if you want to get a bit of grit on your drums, this is a real great way. What you're doing on your overheads, move them down by one. And just above each one, go to distortion, overdrive, ramp up the tone right up to the top, and take the drive down to, say, about 2. And what you can do is you can copy that over as well. And what it does is it slightly dirties up that overhead channel. I'll play it without it and I'll play it with it and you'll see what I mean. And it's an acquired taste. It doesn't fit every track. Of course, you're not going to be doing this on jazz tracks or singer-songwriter acoustic tracks. But anything that's got that kind of real edgy feel and you want a bit of extra bite, you can stick this on your overheads. I'll show you. I'll turn them on halfway through. And if you want to go really nuts, you can actually add it on that really over compressed channel as well. And that's pretty much it in terms of mixing. The only thing that I've really missed off is adding reverb, and it just completely depends on what you're going to be going for on your track. But just as a brief recap for reverb, you want it, don't put any reverb on your kick, and be really sparing with slightly lower ones like your toms. But reverb, on any channel you want to add reverb, such as your overheads, you go to your overheads, go to sends, send it to a different bus channel, say 3, which is a channel that you're going to have your reverb on. Oops, make sure it's a stereo reverb. And you're going to have whatever reverb you've got on there. And you're just going to turn up that bus send there to turn it to your reverb. And you might want to send a little bit of your snare to that reverb as well if you want, on bus 3. And the trick with your reverb, I'll just say briefly, is you want your reverb to kind of to be noticeable on your drums, but not too much. If you've got like reverb that sounds like this, you're not Phil Collins. You don't need that amount of reverb on any snare drum past 1982. So just turn that right down and balance it out. But in terms of mixing your drums, that's it. So the first part of the video showed you how to get all these effects and prep your drum mix. And the second, I showed you how to balance it and some extra tips and tricks in terms of adding the multipressor on here, compressing it on a bus channel, and also doing a little bit of drum doubling. And hopefully over these 2 videos, you've kind of worked out how to mix your drums, and hopefully that's been a big help. These videos are coming out fairly regularly now. I'm going to try and work out loads and loads of tips and tricks and ways of mixing your projects and help and advice. So if you want to subscribe, there's going to be regular videos posted out every week helping you out with your mixing and production. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening. Bye.